Mr. Johnson, you've made some major charges today about institutional racism.
Yes, sir.
And you specifically mentioned the Cleveland Clinic.
Yes, sir.
Those of us who've had many opportunities to visit the Cleveland Clinic as patients or whatever have noticed just empirically a large number of people of color who are on the staff in all kinds of capacities, from physicians on down to others. I'd be very interested in knowing what statistics you have that can prove that the Cleveland Clinic does represent what you call a matter of institutional racism, because my observations are that it's not true.
Yes, sir. Fantastic question. And I would not begin to argue at all the fact that there are positions at the Cleveland Clinic that African Americans fill. My point was very specific. And my point was that hiring African Americans, primarily in low-level service positions, does not make you equitable. My point was that I have not seen. I also made the point that I'm not omniscient or omnipresent, so that I do not know for sure if it's happening. But what I do not see is the Cleveland Clinic making an aggressive effort to be a member of the community in the neighboring poor communities that are on the outside of the clinic. Furthermore, I think that there is an antagonistic relationship in many cases with the communities that border the clinic, because there are those in those communities that are concerned about eminent domain and being able to maintain their residences for the next decade, when those houses and those communities have been a part of the African American community in this city for quite some time. So I think, to your question, this is a very unsophisticated observation on my part that does not have statistics. What it is, however, is a social and environmental observation that there is not an aggressive presence of the Cleveland Clinic in those communities. And if there was, there would be not only residents, members of the community of those areas, but also I think the Cleveland Clinic is an incredible institution, and they would be publicizing more the relationship that they have with those communities if they existed. So to your point, let's applaud them for as many black folks as they decide to hire. But let's deal with the reality that institutional racism goes far beyond being able to simply hire a quota of African Americans for service level positions. And being a part of a community is really about making sure that your presence in that community is about making sure that those that are on the north, south, east, and west of you don't feel like you're an occupying force, but feel like you're a member of their community. Thank you for the question.
Mr. Johnson, you mentioned with respect Leon Higginbotham. He spoke from this same platform quite a few years ago, and if memory serves, he's the only person who ever came here who was so magnificently ruminative that the first question set him going for half an hour, and that's it. That was the whole question period. So your force of rhetoric in the last previous question, two back, suggests you probably could stand in his shoes if you weren't a little more constrained. I would ask you, maybe this is inviting exactly that problem, if you would cipher a bit on Raggedy.
Sure, thank you. Raggedy, neglectful. The real piece for me is, as I look at the universe of the African American community and the institutions, very historical ones that have been designed to represent it, members of the black electorate, especially those that represent predominantly black districts, the faith community, those three being the predominant institutions that were part of the movement for not only civil rights and social justice, but even post-civil rights expansion, have not, in my opinion, been as diligent as they should be, by and large. I think that there are fantastic examples of large institutions and small institutions that in a vacuum are doing some fantastic work and pragmatic work. I think Policy Bridge here in the city of Cleveland is one of those organizations under Randy McShepard that I think is doing a fantastic job on the research side and engaging the broader Cleveland community. So I think that's one example. But I think by and large, many of the problems that continue to persist in our community that are often blamed on racism, more often than not, are about leadership that has been appointed that doesn't do their job. Those that are in positions that don't have vision. Those that have resources that don't effectively use them or use them in a way that is for a limited group and not for the broader masses. More rhetorical and less pragmatic strategies. And a desire to be able to inspire people to a state of euphoric inactivity, but not direct people to being able to effectively do work that's transformative. That's what I mean by Raggedy. Did I answer your question? And I wouldn't presume to step in the shoes of A. Leon Higginbotham.
I've been most interested. Thank you. I'm thinking about President Obama and that he does not, it seems to me, project an African-American culture or persona in any way. I could be wrong about that and maybe wrong about his background in terms of why he should. One, would you like him to do more culturally aware or significant things? And two, what impact do you think it would have on his ability to lead?
Great question. I think that he is a reflection of and exudes African-American culture every time he walks in a room. And so I think that for those of us that are critically thinking black folks, we understand that the image of President Obama in many cases is more powerful than President Obama wearing a red, black, and green flag and running through the House of Congress with a quote-unquote black agenda. Does that mean, however, that I think from a legislative perspective that he is reflecting an African-American agenda? No, I don't think that he is. And I don't think that he should. However, what I do think he should do is, I think that there have been opportunities for him to be able to speak honestly about condition without saying that his strategy is to focus specifically on it. And so I think there have been opportunities where he's talked about unemployment in particular, where he's talked about the fact that if we increase jobs, then that increases jobs for black people. Well, when the unemployment rate for African-American men is drastically higher than any other group, that means that strategies to be able to address that unemployment in some cases have to go above and beyond what the normal strategy is for job creation. I haven't heard him say that. And so I think there's small opportunities for him to be able to deal with the reality. And then I think it's his charge to be able to see, because I work in D.C. and some of you have connections with Washington, D.C. and understand that if it's the Jewish community or if it is the homosexual community or if it is any other special interest group, there are more organizations than you can shake a stick at that have aggressive agendas where they're knocking down the door to get into the president's office, to get into Nancy Pelosi's office, to get into some other member of Congress's office with a pragmatic agenda of what they want their community to look like. It's not Obama's job to have a black agenda. It's the black community's job to have a black agenda. It's Obama's job to be able to respond to what makes sense legislatively that positively affects those that are carrying in an agenda that speaks to transformative work in communities that he as president represents.